There is a quiet kind of despair that lives in the mind that must understand everything. It walks in circles. It builds theories. It stacks answers like bricks, but still feels cold, because clarity of facts is not the same as clarity of soul. And the soul does not survive on facts alone. It needs bread. It needs water. It needs trust. The mind was never built to carry the weight of omniscience. You were not created to know everything. You were created to walk with the one who does. And yet we treat uncertainty like failure. We treat confusion like weakness. We believe not knowing is a flaw when in truth it's the doorway to trust. You see, faith was never meant to begin where everything makes sense. Faith begins where the map ends, where the answers go silent, where the floor disappears and all that's left is his hand. Questions are not enemies. Doubt is not the devil. Sometimes doubt is the very thing that leads us to seek deeper roots. Even the strongest tree only grows tall because it first grew downward into darkness, into soil, into the unknown, and so will you. Stop thinking peace is found in knowing more. Peace isn't in understanding the plan, it's in trusting the planner. Understanding is a gift, but trust is a weapon. And in this war of fear and faith, you don't fight with explanations, you fight with confidence in the one who wrote the story. You say, I need to know why this happened. But what if you don't? What if your peace doesn't require an answer but an anchor? You say, I don't see how this ends, and that's fine, because he sees the end from the beginning, and he does not panic. He does not revise his promises. He does not learn because he already knows. You may be walking in fog, but the one leading you sees like it's noon. He's not confused, he's not surprised, and he's not nervous. So stop acting like the outcome depends on your understanding. The outcome depends on his faithfulness, and he has never failed his word, not once. Sometimes he will lead you through valleys, not to trap you, but to teach you that trust grows better in shadows than in sunlight. Sometimes he will close doors, not to frustrate you, but to remind you that he opens better ones. And sometimes he will be silent, not to distance himself, but to deepen you. The silence of God is not the absence of God. It is the presence of deep trust. So stop trying to explain everything. Stop exhausting yourself with answers. Stop needing to understand before you obey. Faith is not knowing where you're going. It's knowing who is going with you. And when you trust the one who knows everything, you're freer than the man who knows everything except who to trust. You don't need to carry the weight of being right all the time. You don't need to solve every equation before you can rest. You were not designed to be infinite. You were designed to be held by the infinite. There is a difference between wisdom and sovereignty. Wisdom is a gift man may receive. Sovereignty is a crown only one can wear. And that crown is not yours. The more you chase the illusion of control through understanding, the more you will burn out trying to light your own sun. You think if you just knew more, you'd feel safe. If you could just predict the outcome, you'd feel peace. If you could just explain the delay, you'd feel settled. But that's the trick. That's the lie. Peace does not come from knowledge. Peace comes from knowing who holds the knowledge. Your understanding will always be a cup too small for the ocean. You may catch a glimpse, but never the whole depth. You may read a chapter, but never the full book. So stop exhausting yourself trying to read what hasn't been written for you. Some pages were not meant to be read. They were meant to be trusted. Understanding is limited because it was never meant to be your foundation. It was meant to be your companion, not your master. We often confuse trust with laziness. We think trusting means not trying, but trust isn't passivity. Trust is direction under pressure. It's the choice to walk forward when the light is dim, not because the path is visible, but because the guide is reliable. You won't always understand why the door's closed. You won't always see the purpose in the pain. You won't always feel the reason behind the waiting. But even when the logic fails, the loyalty of God does not. Some people trust their plans more than their provider. Some trust their logic more than his love. and when their plans break, so does their faith, because their faith was in the plan, not the person. That is the danger of leaning too hard on your own understanding. It's not bad logic, it's misplaced confidence. There's a limit to what you can process. There's no limit to who you can trust. If you live your life demanding full understanding before obedience, you will delay destiny for the illusion of security, and you will trade purpose for paranoia. Some of the greatest things God will do in your life will make the least sense on paper. Because faith is not built on formulas. Faith is built on fellowship. It is not built in laboratories. It is built in wildernesses, where everything looks unclear, but His presence is unmistakable. You might say, "But I need answers to move forward." But perhaps the truth is, you don't need answers. You need assurance. You need the assurance that even in the absence of clarity, you are still covered. You will never outgrow the need for trust. Not even maturity replaces it. In fact, maturity is measured by your ability to trust without full sight, because trust isn't childish, it's childlike, and there's a difference. The childlike heart says, "I don't understand, but I know who's holding my hand." And that is a deeper wisdom than the one who builds his house on understanding that shifts like sand. So don't fear the limits of your mind. Fear the pride that keeps you from leaning on His. Your understanding is a wonderful servant, but a terrible master. You are not called to be all-knowing. You are called to be known. You are not created to grasp every answer. You are created to walk with the one who is the answer. The longer you try to be your own anchor, the more you will drift in storms you were never meant to navigate alone. So breathe, let go, stop chasing perfect understanding, and start clinging to perfect faithfulness. You said you trusted Him until it stopped making sense. You said you'd follow until the map disappeared. But faith that only works when the path is clear isn't faith, it's preference. And preference can't hold you when the storm comes. It won't carry you through unanswered prayers. It won't anchor you in the midnight hour. But trust will. You thought understanding was the goal. You thought if you could just figure it out, the pain would ease. You thought the tears would stop if the plan made sense. But not all pain comes to be explained. Some pain comes to reveal that what you needed was not an answer, but a deeper dependency. So many people drown in the shallow pool of their own intellect, drowning not from lack of information, but from trying to breathe in a space that was never meant to sustain them. You weren't built to live on understanding alone. That's why people have degrees and still no direction, facts and still no freedom, certainty and still no peace, because understanding can fill the head, but only trust can fill the heart. You'll learn this. Clarity is not always proof of God's presence. Sometimes confusion is the invitation to lean closer. If you knew the full picture, you'd stop looking at the painter. If you could calculate every step, you'd stop listening to his whisper. If everything aligned perfectly on your spreadsheet, you'd never need to walk by faith. So He hides some things not to punish you, but to protect your dependence. Your mind wants formulas. Your soul needs fellowship. Your mind wants timelines. Your spirit needs trust. You can Google a solution, but you can't Google your way into peace. You can search all night, but unless your trust is rooted in something beyond you, you'll always feel like something's missing. Because something is. We were taught to believe that maturity means knowing more, but spiritual maturity is measured in surrender, not certainty. The mature learn to say, "I don't know, but I trust Him. I don't see, but I believe He does. I don't understand, but I'm still walking." That's not weakness, that's strength, that's growth, that's faith under fire. There are moments where explanations would only get in the way. If God told you the whole story, you'd try to edit the script. You'd skip the valley, you'd erase the delay, you'd fast forward the process, and you'd miss the becoming, because sometimes the very thing you're trying to escape is the thing He's using to build you. He's not late. You're just early in the process of understanding, and that's why you must trust him, because he is not operating on your clock. He knows what you don't. He sees what you can't, and while you panic about the pieces, he's working the picture. You don't need to see the full puzzle. You just need to trust that he's placing each piece with purpose, one move at a time, one lesson at a time, one delay that's actually divine at a time. There is freedom in letting go of needing to know. There is rest in trusting the one who already does. And no, this isn't about blind trust. It's about informed surrender, because the one you're trusting has a track record. He's never failed a promise, never missed a step, never lost a battle. He knows the beginning from the end, and he still chose you for the middle. So when your mind demands answers, give it truth instead. Say, I may not know why, but I know who. I may not understand this season, but I know. I'm not alone in it. I may not be strong, but I am held by the one who is, because understanding is limited, but trust stretches beyond the limits of explanation. It climbs higher than logic. It digs deeper than intellect. It lasts longer than reason. It's eternal, and in the end, it won't be your knowledge that kept you standing. It will be your trust in the one who never changes. You were told that doubt meant distance, that questions meant weakness, that if you had real faith, you wouldn't ask anything at all. But that's not trust. That's fear dressed as reverence. That's silence disguised as strength. And it's not real. Because even the most faithful hearts ask, why? Even the strongest minds whisper, how long? Even the closest friends of God cry out, where are you in this? Questions are not enemies. They're evidence of engagement. They're proof that you're still in the fight, still reaching, still wrestling for meaning, and God isn't afraid of your questions. He doesn't flinch when you're confused. He doesn't shut the door because you knocked too hard. He welcomes the one who knocks even if they knock with trembling fists. Some of your greatest breakthroughs won't begin with declarations, they'll begin with questions, not because he needs your questions, but because you do, because a question is a doorway, and sometimes we must walk through doubt to reach depth. We've made the mistake of calling uncertainty rebellion. We've mistaken honesty for disrespect. But truth be told, the ones who question sincerely are often closer to God than those who pretend to understand everything. The surface looks quiet, but the soul is screaming, God, are you here? God, why now? God, what are you doing? That is not unbelief. That is the sound of a heart unwilling to drift into numbness. That is the sound of a soul choosing to stay engaged, even when nothing makes sense, and that matters. Because numbness is easy, indifference is easy. Distance is safe, but asking hard questions, that takes faith. It's easier to walk away than to wait for an answer. It's easier to build a theology that avoids the pain than to stare into it and say, even here, I'm still searching for you. And if you look closely, you'll find that the questions in Scripture weren't erased, they were recorded, marked in ink, held in holy text. Because God doesn't delete our confusion, he dwells in it. He met Elijah in the cave of despair. He answered Job not with a formula, but with a presence. He stood beside Thomas and said, touch and see. Not, be quiet and believe, but come closer through your doubt. Even Christ in his final hour didn't whisper doctrine. He cried out a question, my God, why have you forsaken me? The Son questioned the Father, and heaven did not crumble. So why do we treat questions like poison? Why do we silence our cries when he's the only one who can handle the weight of them? Questions are not the end of faith. They are often the beginning of real, raw, tested faith, because untested faith is shallow, untouched by struggle, unmoved by life. But faith that has been through the fire of uncertainty is the kind that stands. And not all questions have answers, at least not now, but the process of asking, the boldness to wrestle, that changes you. Sometimes God won't give you an answer, because he's more interested in building your anchor. He's forming trust that doesn't break when the answers don't come. He's shaping faith that says, I still believe even in the silence. So no, you don't need to be ashamed of your questions. You don't need to hide them in polite prayers. Bring them all, the angry ones, the confusing ones, the trembling ones, because the goal was never to have perfect understanding. The goal was never to graduate from mystery. The goal is to be real, to be present, to be fully alive in the presence of a God who welcomes both praise and pain. So bring your questions, not to build a wall, but to build a well, a deep place where His truth and your humanity can meet. Because He's not looking for people who know everything. He's looking for people who will still knock, even when the door is heavy. We ask the questions. We wrestle with silence. We bring our confusion to God like a child brings broken toys to their father. But even in our asking, there's a subtle assumption hiding beneath the surface, the belief that we're supposed to be in control. And that belief is not only false, it's exhausting. You plan, you predict. You prepare for every outcome. You try to prevent every storm, fix every flaw, calculate every move. You call it wisdom, but sometimes it's just fear in a tailored suit. Control is the lie we use to comfort our anxiety. It feels safer to think we're holding the wheel, even when the road ahead is covered in fog. But here's the truth. You're not in control, and you never were. You weren't in control of when you were born. You weren't in control of who raised you. You didn't choose the storms that found you. You didn't map out the heartbreaks that shaped you. So why do you still believe the next moment is yours to command? Control is a mirage. The closer you get to it, the more it disappears into vapor. You can schedule every hour, but you cannot stop the unexpected. You can guard your heart, but you can't dictate how others love. You can eat clean, work out, sleep early, and still face a diagnosis you never saw coming, because control isn't real, but sovereignty is, and sovereignty doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the one who sees the whole board, not just your next move. And the irony, the more you cling to control, the more your soul falls apart, because control is a terrible substitute for trust. It's a full-time job with no peace, no rest, and no reward. It tricks you into thinking you're safe while stealing the very stillness you crave. Some people don't need more answers. They just need to release the illusion. They need to stop acting like they're the author when they were only called to carry the pen. You weren't built to orchestrate the entire outcome. You were built to obey, to respond, to be led. But culture will tell you the opposite. Be your own savior. Control your destiny. Take charge of your future. And when life crumbles, you'll wonder why your self-made throne can't hold the weight of real life. Because control gives you the pressure of God without the power of God. You feel responsible for everything. And when something breaks, you blame yourself for not seeing it coming. But you were never meant to carry that level of foresight. That kind of weight belongs to omniscience, not obedience. Your job is not to control the waves. Your job is to trust the one who walks on them. You will try to hold every relationship together, every detail, every outcome, and still things will fall apart, not because you failed, but because some things aren't yours to hold. Let go of the guilt that came from believing you should have done more. You should have seen it sooner. You should have prevented the pain. You are not God. You are not the orchestrator. You are the child learning to rest in the arms of a father who never loses control. The more you try to control everything, the less peace you'll experience. But the moment you surrender, peace rushes in like a flood, not because everything makes sense, but because you finally stopped trying to be the one holding the sky up. There is strength in stewardship, but there is freedom in surrender. God isn't asking you to figure it all out. He's asking you to follow, to release, to trust that even what feels chaotic is still under His hand. So trade your clipboard for open hands, trade your anxious forecasting for daily faith, Trade your need to know for the peace of knowing he knows, because control is an illusion, but his sovereignty. That's unchanging. You gave up control, but you didn't get clarity. You surrendered the illusion, but the fog didn't lift. You thought trust would come with instant vision, but instead it came with shadows. And that confused you, because you assumed surrender would bring simplicity. But the deeper you trust, the more mystery you encounter. Not because God is hiding things to hurt you, but because some things only grow in the dark. Some roots only deepen in silence. Some wisdom only wakes when the lights go out. We don't like shadows. We like spotlight revelation. We want clear answers, quick outcomes, sharp definitions. We want 2 + 2 to always equal 4. But in the kingdom, sometimes 2 + 2 equals dependence. Sometimes the only clarity you'll get is that he's still good. Wisdom is not born in the spotlight. It's forged in quiet rooms, where the questions echo louder than the answers. You thought wisdom was about knowing more, but true wisdom begins where knowing ends. It's not found in the moment everything is explained. It's found in the moment you stop needing to explain everything. Because mystery is not your enemy, it's your mentor. It teaches what information can't. It develops what certainty never could. In the shadows, you learn to listen differently. You learn the difference between God's silence and his absence. You begin to hear the whisper behind the chaos, the stillness beneath the confusion. Shadows are where your sight fails, but your spirit sharpens, where the facts run dry, but your discernment begins to flow. Sometimes he will dim the lights on purpose, so you stop walking by sight and start walking by trust. You won't feel wise in that moment. You'll feel lost. You'll feel stretched. You'll feel like the ground beneath you is shifting. But that's not failure. That's the classroom. That's the work of transformation. Because there's a kind of wisdom that doesn't come from books, mentors, or experience. It only comes from being crushed and kept at the same time. Pressed but not broken, confused but still trusting, and there's nothing more valuable than that kind of knowing, that kind of deep, bruised, seasoned insight that cannot be taught, only lived. God is not interested in making you impressive. He's interested in making you anchored, and anchoring happens in the deep, in the murky, in the mystery. So stop resisting the shadows. You're not being punished, you're being planted. Seeds don't grow in the sun. They grow in the dark. They split open before they rise. They are broken before they become. And so are you. You want clarity to feel strong, but he's giving you mystery to make you wise. Not clever, not quick, wise, the kind of wisdom that doesn't collapse when life doesn't go as planned, the kind that doesn't need to announce itself. It just walks in quiet confidence. If God explained everything up front, you'd never develop the discernment to hear his voice without volume. You'd never gain the inner compass that knows how to navigate the silence. You'd never grow the muscle that trusts when there's no map. He doesn't hide things to confuse you. He hides them to draw you deeper. Into himself, into trust, into revelation that lives beneath the surface. Not everything he's doing is visible. Not everything he's shaping is shareable. Some things are sacred, hidden, slow, formed in the womb of waiting. And in that womb, wisdom begins to breathe. You may not realize it now, but one day you'll look back and see that the dark season was not wasted. It was the birthplace of insight that only mystery could produce. So walk through the shadow, not as a victim of silence, but as a student of the deep, because in that depth, you're not just being led, you're being formed.